Humanity's one-word reply to the Council's tribute demand astonishes the Galactic. The ultimatum, the Council's judgment. The orbital platform hung in the void like a monument to power itself. It was called the Apex, and for 3,000 years it had served as the seat of galactic authority. Every species that reached the stars eventually came here, and every species that came here eventually learned to bow. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood in the observation deck of her transport ship and watched the Apex grow larger through the viewport. The structure was massive beyond comprehension, a city in space that housed representatives from 800 different worlds. Its surface gleamed with lights that never dimmed, powered by technology humanity was still decades from understanding. She had been Earth's representative for 2 years now. 2 years of carefully navigating galactic politics, of learning which species could be reasoned with, and which saw humanity as little more than clever animals. 2 years of watching the Council exercise control over younger civilizations through methods that were always legal, always justified, and always devastating. Today would be different. Today the Council had summoned her not for routine discussions but for judgment. The transport docked at one of the lower platforms reserved for junior species. Elena noticed the location immediately. It was a deliberate message. The powerful species docked at the upper levels where the view was better and the facilities more luxurious. Junior species used the lower docks where everything was functional, but nothing was impressive. She made her way through corridors that seemed designed to make visitors feel small. The ceilings soared overhead, built for species much larger than humans. The walls displayed the symbols of the founding species, the ones who had created the Council and still controlled it after millennia. The Vortakan were the dominant force, a species that resembled enormous crustaceans with crystalline shells that refracted light in hypnotic patterns. They had conquered half the galaxy, before deciding that economic control was more efficient than military occupation. The Zethrim came second in the hierarchy, beings of pure energy contained in mechanical bodies they crafted from materials humans had no names for. Together, these two species had built the Council into an instrument of absolute authority. Elena entered the Grand Chamber and felt the weight of history pressing down on her. The room was designed to inspire awe and fear in equal measure. It could hold 10,000 beings comfortably, and today it was nearly full. Representatives from hundreds of species had come to witness humanity's judgment. She walked toward the central platform where junior species stood when addressing the Council. The walk took 5 full minutes across the polished floor. She could feel eyes on her from every direction. Some were curious. Most were simply waiting to see how quickly humanity would submit. The Vortakan High Chancellor sat on the highest tier, his crystalline shell reflecting the chamber's lights into rainbow patterns. Below him, the Zethrim Prime Arbiter hovered in silence, its mechanical body occasionally releasing pulses of energy that caused nearby equipment to hum. The High Chancellor's voice filled the chamber through translation devices that rendered his clicking speech into something humans could understand. Ambassador Vasquez of Earth, the Council has observed your species for the duration of your membership. We have watched your expansion, studied your capabilities, and evaluated your potential contribution to galactic civilization. Elena remained silent. She knew this was merely the preamble to something far worse. Your species has occupied 17 systems in the past decade, the High Chancellor continued. You have established colonies on 43 worlds. You have extracted resources, built infrastructure, and claimed territory as your own. The Council recognizes that such ambition is natural for young species. However, ambition without guidance leads to chaos. Here it comes, Elena thought. The Council has therefore determined that humanity requires supervision. For the next 200 years, Earth and all human territories will contribute tribute to the galactic treasury. This tribute will ensure that humanity develops responsibly and contributes appropriately to the civilization that has welcomed you. The terms appeared on holographic displays throughout the chamber. Elena read them with growing horror that she fought to keep off her face. 30% of all resources extracted from human space. 40% of all manufactured goods. Restrictions on what technologies humanity could develop without Council approval. Mandatory advisors from Council species placed in positions of authority over human governments. The right for Council species to claim any human world they deemed strategically important. A ban on human military expansion beyond current levels. It was slavery dressed in legal language. It was the systematic dismantling of human sovereignty wrapped in talk of guidance and contribution. These terms are non-negotiable, the High Chancellor said. They are the standard conditions applied to all species at your level of development. 17 previous civilizations have accepted these terms and prospered under Council guidance. You have 72 hours to communicate your government's acceptance. Elena found her voice. And if Earth does not accept? The chamber fell silent. The question itself was unusual. Most species simply asked about the details of implementation. The Zethrim Prime Arbiter spoke for the first time, its voice like the ringing of metal bells. Non-acceptance is not a concept the Council entertains. The terms are designed for your benefit. Rejection would indicate a fundamental misunderstanding of galactic civilization. It would also require the Council to implement these terms through less pleasant methods. There it was, the threat delivered with perfect diplomatic precision. Elena bowed slightly, a gesture that could mean respect or defiance depending on interpretation. I will convey the Council's terms to my government. She turned and walked back across that vast floor with her head high. She could feel the contempt radiating from hundreds of species. They had all accepted similar terms. They had all learned to live within the boundaries the Council established. They thought humanity would do the same. The transport ride back to human space took 3 days. Elena spent that time preparing her report and thinking about Earth's history. Humans had a complicated relationship with authority. They had built empires and torn them down. They had fought wars over the simple right to govern themselves. They had died by the millions rather than accept subjugation. She wondered if that spirit still existed, or if the comfortable life in space had softened humanity's spine. Earth's Emergency Council convened in Geneva, in a chamber buried deep underground. Security protocols were absolute. What was discussed here would determine humanity's future. General Marcus Chen was the first to speak after Elena finished her presentation. He was a career military officer who had fought in the colonial disputes that preceded unified Earth government. His face was weathered and his eyes were hard. They want us to become cattle. Productive, useful cattle, but cattle nonetheless. Dr. Sarah Kim adjusted her glasses and studied the economic projections on her tablet. She was Earth's premier economist, and the numbers she was seeing made her feel physically ill. If we accept these terms, human civilization stops advancing. We become locked into producing for them while they control what we can develop. In 50 years, we'll be so far behind technologically that we'll never catch up. In 100 years, humans will forget we were ever independent. Captain James Rodriguez commanded humanity's largest battle group. He was younger than the others, only 42, but he had earned his position through brilliance and courage. Can we fight them? No, General Chen said flatly. Their military advantage is overwhelming. They have weapons we barely understand. Their shields can withstand anything we can throw at them. Their ships outnumber ours 50-1. In a conventional war, we lose completely. What about an unconventional war? Elena asked. Chen looked at her with new interest. Explain. The Council is used to species that fight the way they fight. Ship to ship, fleet to fleet, following rules of engagement. What if we don't do that? What if we make this so bloody and expensive that winning costs them more than it's worth? Dr. Kim shook her head. You're talking about guerrilla warfare on a galactic scale. The casualties would be enormous. Entire colonies could be destroyed. Entire colonies will be destroyed anyway, Rodriguez said quietly. Just slowly over decades as the Council drains everything we have. At least fighting gives us a chance to remain who we are. The debate continued for 18 hours. Messages came in from every human world, every colony, every settlement. Town halls were held. Votes were taken. Families discussed what kind of future they wanted for their children. The pattern that emerged surprised no one who understood human nature. People were afraid. They understood the odds. But fear was competing with something deeper. Anger. Pride. The bone-deep refusal to accept that might made right. On the 68th hour, the final vote was taken. It was not unanimous. Nearly 30% wanted to accept the terms and hope for better conditions later. But 70% chose differently. Elena received the decision and closed her eyes for a moment. They had voted for freedom even knowing it might mean extinction. They had chosen dignity over survival. She opened her communication channel to the Apex and requested an immediate audience with the Council. The request was granted instantly. They were eager to formalize humanity's submission. As her transport made the journey back to the orbital platform, Elena thought about what she was about to do. One word would change everything. One word would set humanity on a path that might lead to glory or annihilation. She had never been more certain of anything in her life. The response won. Word changes everything, eh? Grand Chamber was even more crowded than before. Word had spread that humanity was about to deliver its response, and representatives from across the galaxy had come to witness the moment. Some came out of political interest. Others came for entertainment. It had been 60 years since any species had seriously considered refusing council terms, and that species had changed its mind within hours after seeing the military forces arrayed against them. Elena walked across that vast floor for the second time in 3 days. Her steps were steady and measured. She had dressed in formal Earth attire, a simple black suit that contrasted sharply with the elaborate garments worn by other species. She carried nothing except a small data chip containing Earth's official response. The Vortakan High Chancellor waited with visible impatience, his crystalline shell refracting the chamber lights into dancing patterns. Ambassador Vasquez, the time limit has expired. Does Earth accept the Council's terms? Elena reached the central platform and stood before the assembled might of galactic civilization. 800 species. Thousands of years of history. Technology that could reshape planets. Military power that could sterilize solar systems. She thought about her grandfather who had fought in Earth's last war for independence. She thought about her daughter who was 7 years old and learning to read. She thought about every human who had ever refused to bow simply because someone told them they must. No, Elena said clearly. The single word echoed through the vast chamber. For a moment there was absolute silence. Then the chamber erupted in sounds that ranged from shock to amusement to confusion. The High Chancellor's shell stopped refracting light, a sign of genuine surprise in his species. Clarify your statement, Ambassador. There appears to be a translation error. There is no translation error, Elena replied. Earth has considered the Council's terms carefully. We have evaluated the costs and benefits. We have studied the precedents. And we have decided that the answer is no. We will not accept tribute demands. We will not surrender our sovereignty. We will not submit to Council authority. The Zethrim Prime Arbiter drifted forward, its mechanical body humming with energy. You understand what you are saying? You understand the consequences? We understand perfectly, Elena said. You have power. You have more ships, better weapons, superior technology. You believe this gives you the right to dictate terms to younger species. You have done this hundreds of times, and every time the younger species has calculated the odds and chosen survival over freedom. She paused and looked around the chamber. But humanity makes a different calculation. We have decided that some things matter more than survival. We have decided that dignity, self-determination, and freedom are worth fighting for even when the fight seems hopeless. A representative from the Kellyan Confederacy stood up, his 6 arms gesturing frantically. His species had paid tribute for 400 years. This is insanity. The Council's fleet will destroy you. You have perhaps 300 warships. They can field 30,000. This is not courage, Ambassador. This is suicide. Elena turned to face him directly. Perhaps it is. But it is our choice to make. You chose to accept terms and live as subjects. That is your decision and we respect it. But do not expect us to make the same choice. Humans have a saying, give me liberty or give me death. We mean it. The High Chancellor's voice took on a hard edge. You speak of choice, but you have none. The Council does not negotiate with junior species. We command and you obey. This is how galactic civilization has functioned for millennia. The strong establish order. The weak benefit from that order. Order built on threats is just tyranny with better marketing. Elena shot back. You call yourselves a council. But how many of these 800 species are here by choice? How many would leave if they could? How many pay tribute not out of gratitude but out of fear? The chamber erupted in angry sounds from multiple species. How dare this human question the fundamental structure of galactic society? How dare she call the council tyrants? But Elena noticed something else. A few representatives were silent, their expressions thoughtful. The Kellyan who had spoken earlier looked troubled. Others were exchanging glances that suggested her words had struck home. The Zethrim Prime Arbiter's mechanical body began glowing with energy, a threat display that made several nearby species step back. You are one species against 800. You are primitives who have been in space for less than a century. You have no allies, no support, no hope of victory. What makes you think you can stand against the combined might of the galactic community? Elena smiled slightly. You keep calling it a community, but it looks more like a protection racket. Pay us or we hurt you. That's not civilization. That's organized crime on a galactic scale. She activated her data chip and a holographic display appeared above her head. It showed messages from across human space. Thousands of them. Millions of them. Messages from soldiers volunteering for the defense forces. From factory workers retooling their facilities to produce weapons. From parents teaching their children why some things were worth dying for. These are my people, Elena said. They are not warriors. Most of them are farmers, engineers, teachers, scientists, artists, but every single one of them has voted to stand against you. Not because we think we can win. Because we think some things are worth losing for. General Chen watched the transmission from Earth's military headquarters buried beneath the Rocky Mountains. He had hoped Elena would be this brave, but seeing it happen still made his chest tight with pride and fear. Send the signal, he ordered. Protocol Defiance is now active. Across human space, military forces moved to pre-planned positions. It was not a conventional defensive deployment. Chen had studied every war in human history, and he had learned one crucial lesson. You cannot beat a superior force by fighting the way they expect. Captain Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UNS Determination and watched his tactical displays come alive. His battle group consisted of 40 ships, but they were positioned in a way that made no conventional military sense. They were scattered through the asteroid fields of the Kyler system, hidden among millions of rocks that would confuse enemy sensors. All ships report ready, his tactical officer announced. Weapons armed. Engines at standby. Waiting for your order, Captain. Rodriguez thought about his wife and son back on Mars. He had recorded a message for them before leaving, just in case. In it, he had tried to explain why he was doing this, why he was choosing to fight a war he could not win. If we submit now, he had said in the recording, then we teach our children that might makes right. We teach them that bullies always win. We teach them that freedom is something you surrender when things get hard. I cannot accept that. I will not accept that. So I am going to fight, and I am probably going to die, but at least my son will know his father believed some things were worth dying for. Back in the Grand Chamber, the High Chancellor issued his final judgment. Humanity has chosen annihilation. The Council will assemble a subjugation fleet. We will occupy your worlds, destroy your military, and implement our terms by force. When you finally surrender, and you will surrender, the terms will be far more severe than what we offered today. Elena bowed slightly. If that is what you must do, then do it. But I warn you, humans do not surrender easily. Every colony, every ship, every human will cost you. We cannot win, but we can make you pay a price you have never imagined. We can make you bleed for every meter of space you take from us. She turned to leave, then stopped and looked back. One more thing, High Chancellor. You asked what makes humanity think we can stand against you. The answer is simple. We do not think we can. We just think we should. And sometimes that is enough. Elena walked out of the Grand Chamber in silence. No species spoke. No one moved. The simplicity and finality of her message had shaken them in ways they did not fully understand. Dr. Sarah Kim sat in her office at the Earth Economic Council and began implementing the second part of Protocol Defiance. If the Council wanted war, they would get war. But not just military war. She sent encrypted messages to contacts throughout the galaxy. Representatives from species that were tired of paying tribute. Corporations that resented Council control over their trade routes. Criminal organizations that wanted to see the power structure disrupted. The message was simple. Humanity is standing up to the Council. If the Council falls, all of you benefit. Help us make them bleed economically and you get a share of the new order we build. It was a long shot. Most species would not risk Council retribution. But it only took a few. A few disrupted supply lines here. A few delayed shipments there. A few systems experiencing technical difficulties at critical moments. The Council called it civilization, but it ran on commerce like everything else. And commerce could be disrupted by people who knew what they were doing and were willing to take risks. The Vortakan High Chancellor watched humanity's ambassador leave and felt something he had not experienced in centuries: doubt. This was not how junior species behaved. They were supposed to be afraid, They were supposed to calculate odds and choose survival. But the human had looked him in the eye and said no, and there had been no fear in her expression, only certainty. "Assemble the subjugation fleet," he ordered. "Maximum strength. I want 5,000 ships. We will make an example of humanity that the galaxy will never forget." But as the orders went out, the High Chancellor could not shake the feeling that something fundamental had just changed. For 3,000 years, the Council had ruled through fear and overwhelming force. Every species had accepted this reality. Until now. The Zethrim Prime Arbiter approached him after the chamber cleared. "That was unexpected. They will break," the High Chancellor said with more confidence than he felt. "All species break eventually. It is simply a matter of applying sufficient pressure." "Perhaps," the Arbiter replied. "But consider this. What if they do not break? What if they fight until they are extinct? What lesson does that teach the other 799 species who pay us tribute?" The High Chancellor did not answer because he already knew. It would teach them that freedom was possible. It would teach them that the Council could be defied. It would teach them that sometimes one word was enough to change everything. That one word was spreading across the galaxy now, carried by news services and gossip and secret communications. Species that had bowed for centuries were hearing about humanity's response and asking themselves a dangerous question. What if we said no? The turning point. The price of freedom. The Council's subjugation fleet assembled at the edge of human space like a storm preparing to break. 5,000 warships from 60 different species, all united under Council command. The Vorticon provided their dreadnoughts, massive vessels that could crack planets. The Zethrim contributed their energy weapons that could turn a ship to vapor in seconds. Dozens of other species added their strength to create a force that had never been defeated. Fleet Commander Zarkoth stood on the bridge of his flagship and studied the tactical displays showing human territory. It was pitifully small compared to Council space. Poorly defended, isolated, this would be the easiest conquest in his 400 years of military service. Intelligence reports indicate human forces are scattered across 17 systems, his tactical officer reported. Primary concentrations around their homeworld and major colonies. They appear to be preparing defensive positions. Zarkoth made a sound that might have been laughter in his species. Defensive positions against this fleet. Begin the advance. First target is the mining colony at New Seattle. We will demonstrate what happens to species that refuse the Council. The fleet moved forward in perfect formation. 5,000 ships advancing like a wave of inevitable destruction. They expected resistance. They expected desperation. They expected a quick victory followed by humanity's surrender. They got something completely different. Captain Rodriguez watched from his hiding spot in the asteroid field as the Council fleet approached. His 40 ships were invisible to their sensors, tucked behind rocks rich in metals that confused scanning equipment. He had learned this tactic from studying Earth's naval battles in World War II, when submarines would hide beneath thermal layers to avoid detection. "Lead elements entering the kill zone," his tactical officer whispered. "Count is 600 ships." Rodriguez felt his heart pounding but kept his voice steady. "Wait for them to commit. We only get one chance at this." The Council ships moved, deeper into the asteroid field, confident in their shields and armor. They had never encountered an enemy that used the environment as a weapon. They were about to learn. "Now," Rodriguez ordered quietly. 40 human ships activated their engines simultaneously and burst from concealment at maximum acceleration. They were small and fast and carried weapons the Council had dismissed as primitive. Railguns that accelerated solid metal slugs to relativistic speeds using nothing but magnetic fields. The lead Council ship never knew what hit it. A tungsten projectile weighing 50 kilograms struck its command section at 20% of light speed. The kinetic energy was equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. The ship simply exploded into fragments. 19 more ships died in the first 30 seconds. The railgun projectiles punched through energy shields like they were not there at all, because the Council's shield technology was designed to stop energy weapons and missiles, not solid projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. By the time the Council fleet tried to respond, Rodriguez's ships had vanished back into the asteroids. The larger council vessels tried to pursue but found themselves in a nightmare of narrow passages and hidden threats. Human ships would appear, fire and disappear before return fire could be aimed. Mines hidden among the rocks detonated as heavy warships passed. The asteroids themselves became weapons, as humans used small nuclear charges to redirect them into enemy ships. After 4 hours of chaos, the Council forces withdrew. They had lost 217 ships. They had destroyed exactly 5 human vessels. Fleet Commander Zarkoth stared at his casualty reports in disbelief. How is this possible? They are primitives with inferior technology. They are not fighting like we expected, sir, his tactical officer said carefully. They are using ambush tactics, terrain advantage, and weapons we did not anticipate. Our shields are ineffective against solid projectile weapons at these velocities. Similar reports flooded in from across human space. At every colony, every settlement, every defended position, humans refused to fight conventionally. They did not line up ship to ship. They did not try to match the Council's superior firepower. Instead, they used tactics that the civilized Council considered dishonorable. At the mining station above New Seattle, Commander Park watched the Council fleet approaching. She had 200 miners with her, all volunteers who had refused to evacuate. The station had no weapons, no shields, no defense worth mentioning. Power up the engines, she ordered. Maximum output. Her second-in-command understood immediately. You are going to ram them. This station masses 80,000 tons, Park said calmly. At full acceleration, we become a missile. Evacuate everyone to the escape pods. I will handle the piloting. The escape pods launched as the Council fleet closed in. They expected the station to surrender or be destroyed from a distance. Instead, it accelerated directly toward their formation at speeds that should have torn it apart. Commander Park aimed for the largest Vortakan dreadnought. The Council ships tried to destroy the station, but it was already moving too fast and spinning irregularly. Their weapons tore chunks from it, but nothing could stop its momentum. The station hit the dreadnought at 30 kilometers per second. Both exploded in a fireball visible from the planet below. Debris scattered in all directions, crippling 9 other Council ships. Park died instantly, but her name became a rallying cry across human space. If miners and civilians were willing to turn their homes into weapons, then the professional military would not let them stand alone. General Chen coordinated the defense from Earth and felt both pride and grief at every report. His forces were fighting brilliantly, but they were also dying. For every 10 Council ships destroyed, humanity lost one. The mathematics were brutal and clear. Eventually, the numbers would overwhelm them. But something unexpected was happening. The war was not staying contained to human space. Dr. Sarah Kim's economic warfare was beginning to show results. Supply ships carrying fuel to the Council fleet kept experiencing mysterious engine failures. Convoys of ammunition were delayed by bureaucratic problems that should not exist. Food shipments for the massive fleet got rerouted to the wrong systems. More significantly, species that had paid tribute for centuries were watching humanity stand and beginning to ask dangerous questions. If humans could say no, why could they not? The Kellian Confederacy had been under Council control for 400 years. They had accepted it because resistance seemed hopeless. But now they watched humans fighting ships 50 times more powerful and still inflicting casualties. They watched humans choosing death over submission. The Kellian High Assembly met in emergency session. The debate was fierce and divided. Finally, Ambassador Thelvin stood to speak. He was old even by Kellian standards, and he remembered stories his great-grandfather had told about life before the Council. For 4 centuries we have told ourselves that we had no choice, Thelvin said quietly. We told ourselves that the Council was too strong, that resistance was suicide, that survival required submission. We made our peace with being subjects rather than free beings. He gestured to the holographic display showing the battle reports from human space. But look at what these humans are doing. They are losing. They know they are losing. Every casualty report makes it more clear that they cannot win, and yet they keep fighting. Why? Because they are fools, someone called out. No, Thelvan said firmly. Because they remember something we have forgotten. that some things are worth dying for, that life without freedom is not really life at all, that sometimes saying no is more important than surviving to say yes. He paused and let his words sink in. The Council has sent 5,000 ships to crush one species of primitives. 5,000 ships because they are terrified, not of humanity's military might, but of humanity's example. If humans can refuse, then we can refuse. If humans can fight, then we can fight. The Council knows that if they do not crush this rebellion absolutely, then others will follow. The assembly fell silent. Everyone understood the implication. I propose, Thelvan continued, that we stop paying tribute to the Council effective immediately. I propose that we declare ourselves an independent civilization once again. I propose that we remember what it means to be Kellian rather than just another subject species. The vote was not unanimous. Nearly 40% argued for caution, but 60% voted for freedom. When the Kellian announcement reached the Council, the Vorticon High Chancellor experienced something very close to panic. One defiant species could be crushed. Two changed everything. Send a fleet to the Kellian homeworld immediately, he ordered. 3,000 ships. We will deal with both rebellions simultaneously. But the Zethrim Prime Arbiter interrupted. We do not have 3,000 ships to spare. The human war is consuming our resources faster than predicted. Every engagement costs us more vessels than we anticipated. If we split our forces now, we risk being unable to suppress either rebellion effectively. The High Chancellor's crystalline shell darkened with anger. Are you suggesting we cannot defeat primitives and Kellian simultaneously? I am suggesting, the Arbiter said carefully, that we may have made an error in judgment. We assumed that overwhelming force would bring quick surrender. Instead, we are learning that these humans mean what they say. They truly would rather die than submit. And worse, their example is spreading. In human space, Captain Rodriguez received new orders and allowed himself a grim smile. Phase 2 of Protocol Defiance was beginning. Plot a course for Council Supply Depot 7, he told his helmsman. We are taking the war to them. Human ships stopped trying to defend fixed positions. Instead, they went hunting. Small battle groups struck deep behind enemy lines, targeting fuel depots, repair facilities, supply convoys. They did not stay to fight when Council ships arrived. They hit hard and fast and vanished. The Council fleet found itself fighting ghosts. Every time they advanced, humans would appear behind them and destroy something critical. The massive fleet required enormous supplies to function, and those supply lines were suddenly very vulnerable. Fleet Commander Zarkoth watched his logistics reports with growing alarm. We are losing ships to supply shortages faster than to enemy action. How is this possible? The humans are targeting our infrastructure, his logistics officer explained. They are not trying to defeat our fleet directly. They are trying to starve it, and it is working. Worse still, other species were taking notice. The Torvani Republic announced they were suspending tribute payments pending negotiations. The Mexith Collective declared themselves autonomous. 3 minor species formally withdrew from the Council. The rebellion was spreading like fire through dry grass. On Earth, Ambassador Elena Vasquez received an encrypted communication from an unexpected source. It was from a Vorticon military commander named Zelkara, and the message was shocking. Ambassador Vasquez, I command a battle group of 12 ships currently operating in the outer reaches of human space. I have watched your species fight with courage and determination that I have never seen before. I have watched my own people use overwhelming force against an enemy that refuses to break, and I have begun to question whether we are the civilization we claim to be. The message continued. My ancestors built the Council to bring order to the galaxy, but over millennia order became control and control became tyranny. We forgot that true civilization requires consent of the governed. Your species has reminded us of this forgotten truth. I am prepared to order my ships to stand down and withdraw from human space. In exchange, I ask only that you remember not all of us have forgotten what we once believed. Elena read the message 3 times, barely believing what she was seeing. A council commander was offering to defect. She forwarded it to General Chen immediately. Is this legitimate or a trap? Chen studied the encryption patterns and authentication codes. It is legitimate. We have an opportunity here. What kind of opportunity? Elena asked. The kind that changes wars, Chen replied. If one council commander can defect, others might follow. The council is not as unified as they want everyone to believe. We need to exploit that. 3 days later, Commander Zelkara's battle group withdrew from human space without firing another shot. The action was unprecedented. Council forces did not retreat. Council commanders did not question their orders. But it had happened, and the entire galaxy knew about it. The Vortakan High Chancellor summoned his remaining fleet commanders and demanded explanations. How can one commander simply decide to withdraw? Where is discipline? Where is unity? No one had a good answer because the truth was uncomfortable. The war was lasting longer than expected. Casualties were higher than predicted. Supply problems were becoming critical. And the longer it went on, the more species began questioning whether the Council was worth supporting. The Zethram Prime Arbiter delivered the final assessment. We have 3 options. First, we continue the war and likely destroy humanity, but at a cost that will bankrupt us economically and politically. Second, we negotiate a settlement that gives humans some autonomy while maintaining our authority. Third, we withdraw completely and acknowledge that our power is not absolute. Withdrawal is not an option, the High Chancellor said firmly. We cannot show weakness. Then we must choose between victory at any cost or compromise, the Arbiter replied. But understand this. If we choose total victory, we may win the battle but lose the war. Every species in the galaxy is watching. If we must commit everything we have to crush one rebellious species, what does that say about our strength? The debate continued for hours, but eventually a decision was reached. The Council would offer humanity a settlement, not the original tribute demands, but something less crushing, something that might let both sides claim victory. Elena received the offer and took it to Earth's government. The terms were still harsh, but they were survivable. Humanity would maintain sovereignty over their current territory. They would pay limited tribute for 50 years rather than 200. They would have representation on the Council rather than just submission to it. The debate on Earth was fierce. Some argued they should accept it. They had proven their point. They had forced the Council to negotiate rather than simply dictate. That was a victory in itself. Others argued they should refuse and keep fighting. They had the Council on the defensive. Why stop now? General Chen provided the military assessment. We have lost 40% of our fleet. Our colonies are damaged. Our economy is under severe strain. We can keep fighting, but our casualties will become unsustainable within weeks. The offer is not generous, but it lets us survive as an independent civilization. Elena cast the deciding vote. We accept, not because we are beaten, but because we have achieved what we set out to do. We proved that might does not make right. We proved that one species saying no can change the galaxy. We proved that freedom is worth fighting for. The treaty was signed aboard a neutral station, with representatives from dozens of species present. The Vortakan High Chancellor looked diminished somehow, as if the war had aged him in ways his species did not usually age. You have earned my respect, Ambassador Vasquez, he said quietly, and my caution. The Council will not forget this. Neither will humanity, Elena replied, and neither will the dozens of species who watched us fight. You can never go back to simply dictating terms now. We have shown the galaxy that you can be defied and survived. That changes everything. 6 months after the treaty was signed, the Kellyan Confederacy negotiated their own independence. The Torvani Republic followed. Within a year, the Council had transformed from an authoritarian body to something closer to an actual representative government. It was not perfect. Old power structures did not die easily, but it was different. Elena Vasquez stood in the observation deck of a new station being built at the border between human and Kellyan space. It was going to be a trade hub and cultural center, a symbol of the new order being built. Captain Rodriguez joined her, his uniform bearing the scars of 3 major battles. Was it worth it, he asked. All the lives lost, all the destruction? Elena thought about Commander Park, who had died ramming her station into an enemy dreadnought. About the thousands of other humans who had fought and died rather than submit. About the galaxy that was slowly, painfully learning to be more than just strong species dominating weak ones. Yes, she said finally, because we taught the galaxy something it had forgotten. That freedom is not given by the powerful. It is taken by the brave. That one word spoken with conviction can change history. That sometimes the greatest victories come from simply refusing to surrender. She looked out at the stars, at the vast galaxy that was beginning to transform. We said no, and the galaxy heard us. That will echo for generations. Rodriguez nodded slowly. The Council still has more ships, better technology, and centuries of experience. But they lost something in this war that they can never get back. What's that? Elena asked. The illusion of inevitability. For 3,000 years, species believed that resisting the council was pointless. That submission was the only rational choice. We shattered that belief. Now every species knows that resistance is possible, that defiance can work. The council can never rule through fear alone again. He was right, Elena realized. The war had cost humanity dearly. Entire colonies had been damaged or destroyed. Tens of thousands had died. The economic burden of the conflict would take decades to overcome. But in exchange, they had preserved their freedom and inspired a revolution across the galaxy. A message appeared on Elena's communication device. It was from Earth's new president, Maria Santos. Ambassador, the memorial service for our fallen is tomorrow at noon. The president requests your presence. Elena closed her eyes briefly. Tomorrow she would stand with thousands of other humans and honor those who had died defending freedom. She would see the names carved into stone, each one representing someone who had chosen principle over survival. I'll be there, she replied. Rodriguez put a hand on her shoulder. They'll want you to speak. What will you say? Elena looked out at the stars again, thinking about the question. What could she say that would honor the sacrifice? What words could capture what humanity had achieved? I'll tell them the truth, she said finally. That we were afraid. That we knew the odds were against us. That many of us doubted we would survive. But we said no anyway. Because some things matter more than survival. I'll tell them that their sacrifice changed the galaxy. Not through conquest, but through example. I'll tell them that freedom is never free, but it is always worth the cost. She turned to face Rodriguez directly. And I'll tell them that humanity's greatest strength is not our weapons or our tactics or our technology. It's our refusal to accept that might makes right. It's our stubborn insistence that every being deserves dignity and self-determination. It's our willingness to stand up to power even when standing up seems like suicide. Rodriguez smiled slightly. That's why you were the right person to say no to the council. You understood it wasn't about military strategy or political calculation. It was about identity, about what kind of species we wanted to be. They stood together in silence for a moment, watching ships move through space around the new station. Human ships, Kellian ships, vessels from a dozen other species that had found the courage to claim their independence. The galaxy was changing. The old order built on domination and tribute was crumbling. It would not happen overnight. There would be setbacks and struggles. Some species would cling to the council's protection even as it transformed. Others would test their newfound freedom by making mistakes and learning from them. But the fundamental shift had occurred. The galaxy had learned that power without consent was just tyranny. That civilization required more than technological advancement and military might. That sometimes one word spoken with conviction could reshape the future. That word was no, and it echoed across the stars, inspiring species that had forgotten they could choose their own destiny. It whispered through council chambers that had once dictated terms without question. It rang in the hearts of beings who had accepted subjugation as inevitable. Elena thought about her daughter back on Earth, now 8 years old and asking questions about the war. She had asked her mother why humans had fought when everyone said they would lose. Elena had knelt down and looked her daughter in the eyes. Because, sweetheart, living on your knees is not really living at all. Because freedom is not something others give you. It's something you claim for yourself. Because sometimes the only way to teach bullies that they can't win is to refuse to lose, even when refusing costs everything. Her daughter had thought about this seriously. But you won, Mommy. We're still here. We won something more important than survival, Elena had told her. We won the right to decide our own future. We won the respect of the galaxy. We won proof that courage matters more than strength. And we won a lesson that will be remembered long after we're gone. That one species saying no can change everything. Now, standing in the observation deck watching the new order being built, Elena understood that the lesson would indeed be remembered. Human children would learn about the day their ambassador stood before the council and refused to bow. Other species would teach their young about the primitives who proved that freedom was worth fighting for. The council itself would never be the same. The Vortakan High Chancellor had resigned in disgrace, replaced by a coalition leadership that included representatives from formerly subjugated species. The Zethrim were withdrawing from direct governance, focusing instead on technological development and trade. The entire structure was being reformed from an empire into something that resembled actual cooperation. It was messy and imperfect and sometimes frustrating, but it was better than what had come before. A new ship appeared on the observation deck's view screen, approaching the station. Elena recognized it immediately as Kellyan design. Ambassador Thelvan had sent a message saying he wanted to meet with her. When he arrived 30 minutes later, the old Kellyan looked tired but satisfied. His species had spent the past months negotiating their place in the new galactic order, and it had not been easy. "Ambassador Vasquez," he said, greeting her with the traditional Kellyan gesture of respect. "I wanted to thank you personally before returning to my homeworld." "Thank me for what?" Helena asked. "For reminding us that we were more than subjects," Thelvan replied. "My people had forgotten what it meant to be free. We had accepted our chains as inevitable. Then we watched your species fight against impossible odds, and we remembered. We remembered that our ancestors had built a civilization based on choice and dignity. We remembered that submission is a choice, not a requirement." He looked out at the station being constructed. "This place will stand as a symbol of what you accomplished. Not a military victory, but something far more important. You changed how the galaxy thinks about power and freedom." Elena felt humbled by his words. "We only did what we believed was right. We said no because we couldn't say yes and still be who we are." "Exactly," Thelvan said with satisfaction. "And in doing so, you gave the rest of us permission to be who we are as well. The Council ruled for 3,000 years because everyone believed resistance was futile. You proved that belief wrong. You proved that one species, one ambassador, one word could change everything." After Thelvan left, Elena returned to watching the construction. Workers from multiple species were collaborating on the station, building something that represented cooperation rather than domination. It was a small symbol of the larger transformation happening across the galaxy. Her communication device chimed again. This time it was General Chen from Earth's military headquarters. "Elena, I wanted to give you advance notice. The memorial design has been finalized. It will include the names of all humans who died in the war, along with one additional element." "What element?" Elena asked. "A single word carved in letters 10 meters high," Chen said. "The word that started everything. The word that changed the galaxy. Just one word at the center of the memorial where everyone who visits will see it first." Elena didn't need to ask what word it was. She already knew. "No." 3 years after the war ended, Elena Vasquez retired from diplomatic service. She had served humanity well, but it was time for new voices to shape the future. She returned to Earth and spent her days writing a comprehensive history of the conflict, ensuring that future generations would understand not just what happened, but why it mattered. Her daughter, now 11, would sometimes sit with her and ask questions about the war. "Mom, were you scared when you told the Council no?" "Terrified," Elena admitted. "I knew what it might cost. I knew people would die because of that word." "Then why did you say it?" Elena set down her writing and gave her daughter her full attention. "Because fear is not a good enough reason to give up your freedom. Because I wanted you to grow up in a galaxy where humans were respected, not just tolerated, because someone needed to prove that the Council could be defied, and because sometimes doing the right thing means being brave even when you're scared." Her daughter nodded thoughtfully. "I want to be brave like you when I grow up." "You don't have to be brave like me," Elena said gently. "You just have to be brave like you. Everyone's courage looks different. Some people are brave in wars. Others are brave in standing up for what's right in their daily lives. The important thing is not how you show courage, but that you show it when it matters." The history Elena was writing would eventually become required reading in schools across human space. It would be translated into hundreds of languages and studied by species throughout the galaxy. But its core message was simple. Freedom is not given. It is claimed by those willing to say no to tyranny, even when saying no seems impossible. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. And sometimes one word, spoken with conviction at the right moment, can change the course of history. The galaxy Elena had helped reshape continued to evolve. New alliances formed. Old power structures adapted or collapsed. Species that had been enemies learned to cooperate. It was not perfect. There were still conflicts and injustices, but the fundamental principle had changed. No species could rule others simply because they were stronger. Consent mattered. Freedom mattered. The dignity of every being mattered, and at the center of it all was one word that had echoed across the stars and changed everything. No. The memorial on Earth became a pilgrimage site for beings from across the galaxy. They would stand before that 10-meter-high word carved in stone and reflect on what it represented. Many would touch the letters reverently, drawing strength from the courage humanity had shown. Some would weep for the cost. Others would feel inspired to stand against injustice in their own lives. All would leave understanding that freedom is precious precisely because it must be defended. Captain Rodriguez, now an admiral, would sometimes visit the memorial late at night when few others were there. He would read the names of the soldiers he had commanded, the brave souls who had died fighting for something they believed in, and he would remember the moment when one ambassador speaking one word had set events in motion that changed the galaxy. Dr. Sarah Kim went on to become the architect of the new galactic economic system, one based on fair trade rather than tribute. She would credit humanity's stand against the Council as the moment that taught her economics was about more than numbers. It was about justice. General Chen lived to see humanity become one of the leading voices in the reformed Galactic Council. Not through military might, but through moral authority. The species that had refused to bow was now the species others looked to for leadership. And Ambassador Elena Vasquez, in her retirement, watched it all with quiet satisfaction. She had been afraid that day in the council chamber. She had known the risks. She had understood that her one word might doom her species to extinction, but she had also understood something more fundamental. That some things were worth any cost. That freedom and dignity were not luxuries but necessities. That being human meant refusing to accept that might made right. She had said no, and the galaxy had listened years later. When historians asked her what she thought her legacy would be, Elena smiled and said simply, "I hope I'm remembered as the person who proved that one word can change everything. That standing up to power is possible even when it seems impossible. That courage is contagious and freedom is worth fighting for. But most importantly," she added, "I hope I'm remembered as someone who understood that being strong doesn't mean having the biggest weapons or the most ships. It means knowing when to say no and having the courage to accept the consequences." The galaxy had learned that lesson. Species that had been subjugated for millennia had rediscovered their agency. The council that had ruled through fear had been transformed into an institution that governed through consent. And all of it had started with one ambassador, one moment, one word. No, that word echoed across the stars. A reminder that power without justice is tyranny, that freedom must be claimed and defended, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply refuse to surrender your dignity. Humanity had said no to the most powerful force in the galaxy, and in doing so, they had shown every species that freedom was not just possible but worth any price. The war had been costly, the struggle had been hard, but the outcome had been worth it. The galaxy was free because one species had been brave enough to say one word. No, and that word would echo forever. Comment for next part.